and talking with Janis Hall of the J Hall World Report. She does a fascinating job bringing the most complicated issues of the world down to the kitchen table so that you might understand it. And without further ado, I want to introduce to some and present to others the great Janis Hall. Good evening, Janis. It's a great joy to have you here.
Hi, happy to be here.
Great. Uh, Listen, I want to ask you something real quick. It doesn't have anything to do with foreign situation. Well, maybe in Black Lives Matter it does. But Black Lives Matter and the 1619 Project have scrubbed all of their radical beliefs from their websites. I want to ask you, in your opinion, why would they scrub all of their ideals that they built themselves on? Uh, and how will that impact uh, Americans around the country?
Well, I mean, you scrub it when you don't want people to know.
Hmm.
And that's exactly what they're doing. And how's that going to, well, I will say this. I am kind of amazed at how many references to the 1619 project I have seen just generally, around.
Yes.
And it's a little disturbing, especially since it's they basically have a history of love. So I would hope that it would have some, positive impact, but I'm kind of guessing it won't.
Exactly. Exactly. So we're not looking at Black Lives Matter and the 1619 Project and George Soros. They're not making a conciliation and transition saying that we've changed our heart, we've changed our mind. We're just basically changing the way we dress, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, does anybody really think that they've actually changed?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I want to talk with you tonight about China and the China virus. We can now say China virus. We couldn't say that before. Um, and the whole concept is that Donald Trump has taken it strong to the United Nations, which I believe is owned by China now, and stated that China has to be held accountable for uh, all of the deaths around the world and for the release of that particular virus on the world. Your thoughts?
Well, Trump is absolutely correct. China does need to be held accountable for this. Well, they need to be held accountable for a lot of things,
Yeah.
including this virus. And I think that, like many, that it came from a lab. I don't think it was necessarily intentional. I do think that they were probably working on it. Definitely have warned people earlier about this, and they didn't. And yes, I think that China does need to be held accountable for this and many other things.
Now, Li Man Mei Jin, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, um, did a report that indicated that this was a creation by the Chinese military, this particular virus, and that it was created for weaponized purposes. Is there something at all, any gumption by the United Nations to do anything against China, or is it because they are so well indoctrinated by despots they have no interest in dealing with this subject matter at all?
I think that the UN have any desire to much of anything of substance. So no.
Mm-hmm.
Uh yeah, no. They're not going to do anything.
There you go. See, complexity brought into simplicity. Apparently, this week, the Saudi king made a speech to the United Nations. It seems like the end thing to do this week. And quite frankly, was aghast at what Iran has been doing with the Middle East. I wanted to get your thoughts on what the Saudi king stated and any key things that you took from that particular speech.
Well, I think it's first to note that he actually did a speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is apparently been over 50 years, and it wasn't even him. So this is the first time they've actually addressed the UN, and I think it's interesting they're doing it now when Iran is being difficult, and you have these new peace deals with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it doesn't have that with Israel, but that's still something that's happening in their sphere of influence. So I think that this is probably Saudi Arabia trying to get out in front of Iran and trying to say, hey, we're the good guys, and Iran is, the one that's causing trouble and behaving badly. I say Saudi Arabia being the good guys with like a big caveat, but
Yeah.
yes.
Now, in regards to this, um, we know that Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, did that peace agreement with Israel. The expectation is for Saudi Arabia to come on a little bit later. Is this the king's way of saying, yes, I'll be coming along aboard? Or is this merely him stepping forward for political reasons and for military reasons alone?
I think it's probably both. I think that it accomplishes a few things. He
Mm-hmm.
did mention that, the Palestinians are still an important issue, and that's been the crux of all of Israel's problems with the Middle East. So it's very possible. There definitely seems to be whispers. I think they'll probably see how it goes with the UAE
Mm-hmm.
first, just to kind of test out the waters. And it may not be for a little while, but I'm guessing that they're beginning to soften up to the idea.
Wow. I have to ask you this because Michael Brown, the leftist commentator that comes on our program on Thursdays at 9 p.m., stated that you could not have peace in the Middle East unless you go through the PLO. Do you believe that?
Well, I don't think that you could have peace in the Middle East really at all, generally speaking. So I will say that. But I mean, I know what he's trying to say. He's trying to say that there won't be peace between Israel and any of the Arab countries unless the Palestinians are happy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think the Palestinians are ever going to be happy, and we're
Yeah.
seeing Israel make deals with other Arab countries. So, in that regard, yes, it seems as if you can.
Uh, Tonight we're talking with Janis Hall, J Hall World Report. Uh, on the next topic, this is a kind of a silly one I wanted to put out there because some people say that we're too deep. Well, at least they say I'm too deep, uh, deep and dark. So here's a story about Russia arresting Jesus. I wanted to get your thoughts on the fact that the Russians arrested someone of a cult. What does that mean?
Well, it means that cults happen everywhere. So, as much as I could find out about this, which was not a ton, okay,
Yes.
it basically seems as if this guy was kind of following the normal cult behavior with it being somewhat abusive to others,
Yeah.
as well as some corruption. Now, obviously, Russia has. they will say people are corrupt when they're not really, just because it's
Yeah.
a political problem. However, I don't think that a self-proclaimed Jesus in Russia is that much of a political problem for Putin. So I'm going to assume that this was done as just a normal um, criminal action.
There you go. It's just a criminal thing. Cults are cults, no matter where they are.
Cults are cults.
It can happen to you, even if you're in Russia. Um, there, on a serious tip regarding corruption, Ri Zhengguang, a critic of Chinese leader Xi Jinping, has been sentenced to 18 years for corruption charges. Is this a sign that you should not criticize the leader when you're in China?
Yes. All right. This one's the exact opposite. This is absolutely political. This is absolutely Xi Jinping saying, okay, that's it. You can't talk about anything bad. You can't criticize me. You can't criticize anything about the coronavirus. We're just gonna, within a few months, be you to 18 years. So it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a rich, wealthy, big kahuna in China, and they'll still get you if you speak out.
Well, all he did was call President Xi Jinping a clown. That's all he called him. What? Why is that so?
Some people take offense at that. Some people aren't as cool as Trump. Okay.
Exactly. Wow. So, is there any hope? Because he's like 69 years old. He is not going to be 87 years in prison. I'm 87 years old in prison, is he?
Probably not.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. Now, the court had accused him of embezzling more than $7 million in public funds, accepting bribes, uh, but you could easily get those charges brought against you when you have called the chair of the Communist Party a clown, right? Are these trumped up charges, speaking of Trump?
They absolutely could be. It's also possible that these things were done sort of in a gray area,
Mm-hmm.
and because he ran afoul of, uh, Xi Jinping, that that's it.
It was
You know,
okay for you to steal money as long as you didn't call me a clown. The minute you call me a clown, enough. You can't steal money anymore.
yes, yes.
Now, I want to discuss with you also the situation with Turkey and Greece because they've been at it for most of this particular year, and we've been focused on the pandemic and everything. But apparently, there is some type of map that some call fictitious, um, others say is absolutely true, that marks off the right territory for Turkey and Greece. Your thoughts on that?
So my thoughts on this are, well, I'll back up and I will say, so this map was created, I guess, in around 2000 uh, by, I think, a university in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically was to kind of set the where the territorial waters were for Turkey and, Greece and Cyprus. And, well, it generally gives Greece a good amount of water, and so Turkey's not happy about it. And I think one of the most interesting things about this story, though, is that Turkey said this on Twitter,
Wow.
and I'm just like, wow, Twitter.
180 characters. We don't agree. Uh, I
Yes.
haven't we seen this picture before when we were talking about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was the redrawing of the South China Sea and what China
Yep.
has done. Um,
Yeah, I think that they're different. I think that China's just trying to get as much as possible, um, creeping slowly. And I think the problem with Greece and Turkey, well, I mean, that's kind of been going on for thousands of years almost. So
yeah.
I'm guessing that that's not going to be resolved in the near future.
Wouldn't it be funny if they said, "Hey, this map is pretty cool. We'll go with it." Can you imagine Turkey doing that? No,
Really, no,
no.
no, no. But hopefully, so far it's just people being unhappy. There hasn't really been much actual fighting. So long as it sort of stays that way, I think we'll be generally be okay.
There were concerns recently regarding potential war. Um, Speaking of China, um, war against India, and it looked as if they were really ready to go to blows. I mean, they were amassing troops on both sides of the Himalayas. They were ready. The Chinese had already attacked 21 of the soldiers in India. Um, and so now it appears, it appears that they have an agreement. Can you tell us all about that?
All right. So, yeah, we were talking about this story for a few weeks now. Uh, China was sending troops, India was sending troops. It looked like they were both going to settle in for the winter and glare at each other across the border
Mm-hmm.
and, maybe have a few little skirmishes. Well, it seems now that the countries have gotten together and they decided they're not going to send any more troops, which is good. The troops that are there are still there, which is, maybe not great. But I guess it's progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of progress. So I guess they probably looked at each other and looked into the abyss of China and India going to war and thought that that was probably not a good idea. I mean, those are two very large countries, and it would not be pretty.
No,
So no, it would be bad. And I imagine they probably looked at that and said, well, maybe we don't want to try this out right now, so maybe we'll just stop sending troops to our borders and just everybody can just take a breath. I
now
don't think this is the end of it though.
exactly, exactly. You got to have a pretty big ego to be Xi Jinping to even do this. But we're talking about the Himalayan mountains. We're talking about uh, both nations being so their terrain is so almost impenetrable at times that it would be very difficult to send troops unless you had a true, uh, can I say, nuclear option. Do you believe that they would go as far as to go nuclear between each other?
Not right now. Not right now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously that's something that they both that goes into the calculation for both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think at the moment that they're probably thinking about that. I would hazard a guess that India and Pakistan are probably thinking more about that than India and China.
I would concur with you in terms of that. Finally, I want to talk with you about something from the Vatican. And a lot of people don't know that the Vatican is its own country. But there's been a fight over whether to compromise with the Protestants or to remain strict in terms of Catholicism regarding the communion. And so I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the communion revolt that's happening at the Vatican and how the Pope isn't really helping the situation. He's become Mr. Joe Biden on the flip flop.
All right, so this is basically that we have Protestants, okay, would essentially like to have a reciprocal agreement with the Catholics that, you know, either church, basically. And the Catholics have generally said, nope, you can't do this. These are, we have there's too much of a difference between how we view these things that we are not going to do it.
Hmm.
And I mean, the Catholic Church is hard to change. I will say that.
But the Catholic churches are empty. I'm just, I just they're empty.
Yes.
You got space. Why not? It just makes sense. Um, is the Pope helping in this regard at all? Is he being kind of, flimsy on this particular
A little
issue?
wishy washy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could be, he's trying to be political, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
I, I want to ask you on this particular situation. Does the Vatican have as much influence on the world as it used to have?
no, obviously not.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they still have a lot of power. I think that they still are generally a good representative for Christianity around the world, for the most part. But yeah, I mean, they've definitely fallen from the heights when they could basically command armies
Yeah, they have.
to do their bidding.
Now, I want to ask you in this last story, and you know what? For the first time in 5 years, we've gone through all of the stories. Can you imagine that? First time. Write this date down.
Wow. Okay. We'll just have to keep all the stories really, we'll just have to talk about them in very short periods of time.
Very short.
Yeah.
Very uh,
Yes, very short.
when necessary. Africa is basically turning to the entertainment industry and the arts as a way of seeking productivity. And they are recruiting the U.S. to invest in such. I want to ask you, should we be concerned about whether someone can parade or whatever, do a little ballerina thing, or should we be investing in infrastructure in Africa?
Well, I tend to think that we should be investing in a, I think that this is really a good way to do it. It will garner a lot of soft power, especially if you're involved. Sure, I think that it's saying that Africa is, kind of really getting involved in some of the pop culture and arts uh, areas, and hopefully we will see some, good stuff that comes out of there.
I want to ask you, would people begin to see that as a propaganda or us attempting to control their resources per se or control their people, or will the Africans see that as a legitimate investment in their development?
So I think that other countries, and to name names, I will specifically say Russia and China, will
Mm-hmm.
see it as the US basically sticking its nose where it doesn't belong and having undue influence area. I think, however, realistically, it depends on how we do it. It depends on how we support them and how we invest. And you don't have to be propaganda to promote, I'm going to say American values, but
Yes.
really, I mean, Western values of, liberty and freedom.
Mm-hmm. Now, want to ask you here in closing, are there any stories that you think are going to be important, upcoming, that we should be paying attention to?
Well, let's see. Obviously, domestically, Supreme Court pick. I'll be fascinated. I'm fascinated to see how that's going to go.
Yep.
Um, Internationally, uh, there's been a lot of migrants who are going into the UK. Well, and I'm thinking that that may come up in the near future
Mhm.
as another situation.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Janice. You're always awesome. God bless you. Janice Hall, the J Hall World Report, ladies and gentlemen. And whatever you do, don't go out and make a cult in Russia. Don't do it.
Don't make one here in America either.
Please, we are a cult free zone. Listen, we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, with more of the best in urban conservative talk right after these messages with a wonderful conversation with a wonderful young woman. We apologize for